team here, and thank all of you for being here tonight. It's great to see a couple familiar faces, but it's also nice seeing new faces on Zoom. I spend a lot of time looking at the same set of faces in different contexts in Zoom. So thank you. I thank Bill for inviting me to present to you all this evening. So my name is Anthony Culpepper. I work with the Mountain Studies Institute. I'm with the Forest Program at Mountain Studies. And currently I serve as the coordinator for one of our forest health collaboratives here in Southwest Colorado. So I work with the Four Rivers Resilient Forest Collaborative, which is focused on the geography of San Juan and La Plata County, so the central part of the San Juans. I know a few of y'all will probably be familiar with the Dolores Watershed Resilient Forest Collaborative over on the Dolores side of things, or the San Juan Headwaters Forest Health Partnership over on the Pagosa side of things. And so we have three pretty strong and functioning forest collaboratives here in the San Juans, and working all sorts of forest health issues, mitigation, and really kind of that collaborative focus at the landscape scale. A lot of my interest currently is looking at where we're prioritizing treatments on the ground, across our region. And one of those treatments is prescribed fire. And so I'll talk about that here toward the end. But Bill kind of wanted me to give you all a presentation on, what we're thinking about as far as fire weather outlook for this year. And so if folks have questions, I'm pretty good at monitoring the chat box as we go, facilitating lots of meetings of late. So feel free to, here we go. Feel free to drop a message in the chat if you have something as I'm going along. Otherwise, we'll have some time at the end for an open conversation. So again, thank you all for allowing me to present this evening. So as you can see here, and just to confirm, folks can see my slides, correct?
Yep, we can see them.
Cool, thanks, Charlie. We are still in a pretty dry period. So what we're looking at here is, it's the drought index, so it's a national index. It's a compilation of a whole sorts of things, so soil moisture being one, precipitation being another factor in that. And this is for, I will be able to share my presentation for everyone at the end of this. So I'll have that plus a bunch of links to go out to you all as far as resources that you can look into as far as fire weather. So thinking about drought index, we are still in a pretty dry period of time. So think back to 2018, that was a very dry year. So we're looking here on our chart here. So this is for the San Juan Basin as a whole. I think one of the caveats I want to make sure that everyone is aware of as I present this information. This information is really kind of based on regional and sort of scale modeling. And as we know, there's a lot of local nuance in, differences across the San Juans, much drier on the west side versus the east side. So please take that into consideration as I'm presenting information. So these are overall kind of snapshots of how things are and how things might look going forward this year as far as fire weather. Cool, I can do that. I thought it was. Great, sorry about that.
So that actually looks like that's now in presenter mode. I'm not sure. So we still.
Oh, yeah, this is the thing that happens. One moment.
There we go.
Cool. Sorry, guys, I'm having a little bit of a technical issue here. I'm gonna unshare and then reshare. Am I still full screen, Charlie?
Yes, you are. Thanks.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, you think after a year plus of Zoom, we'd all be masters at this, but here we are. So again, what we're looking at is sort of a running sequence of drought index between the year 2000 and the present for the San Juan Basin. So basically Southwest Colorado. Where we see dark red, that's exceptional drought. Where we see light yellow or white, that is either no drought or light to moderate drought in terms of index. So we can see here that 2018 was a pretty darn dry year, as we all remember. And we were actually looking really good going into 2020, but 2020 turned out to be also a very dry year. We had a very weak precipitation in the spring, and monsoon was pretty well non-existent for 2020. So we're coming into the 2021 already pretty dry. And as we all kind of know, although I will say that I really don't know, because I'm actually talking to you guys from Southeast Georgia currently. So I've kind of missed a lot of the winter in Southwest Colorado this year. But it's been a pretty dry year thus far in terms of snow in Southwest Colorado. So we're running a little bit below average. So I'll show some stuff on that. So we're already going into 2021 dry, and forecast throughout 2021 to continue to be dry. So with that, sorry, Charlie, did my slide advance?
It did not.
Cool, there we go.
Perfect.
So looking at, again, this is looking at precipitation across our regions. This is the Rocky Mountain region for one of the fire monitoring networks that's out there. So looking at average precipitation over the last 3 months, and again, so this is set from late February, but this hasn't changed much since then. So where we see, these yellow and orange colors here in Southwest Colorado, that means we're below average for just precipitation here in Southwest Colorado. So again, not looking great going forward into this year. So this is a display of snow water equivalent for the San Juan Basin. So, how much snow is out there, how much snowpack is there up in the high country currently. And so we're currently sitting at about 82% of average for the basin. This green line represents the median over the past 40-ish years now. The black line here represents the current water year. And so water years run from October 1st to September 30th. So a little bit different than the calendar year. And that's how our water managers track what's happening, can make predictions of what kind of water to expect for our human uses, in terms of reservoirs, irrigation, et cetera. And so we're sitting well below average, but not exceptionally below average. This red line here represents 2018. So we're not on par as far as snowpack with 2018, but we're still below average. And so it's that compounding of dry year, dry winter going into another dry year brings our concern up for fire weather for the 2021 fire season. Just for reference here, this sort of teal line is the 2019 snowpack. So just for reference of a very wet season on average compared to a below average season compared to a well below average season for the last several years here. So there's a lot of variability that we see. Yes, Lisa, that is correct. The green line is I wouldn't say normal, that is the median. So that's the average over the last 40 years of record keeping for snow-tell sites. And the black line is our current water year. So, so again, we're not really forecast to have any significant storms coming in, although there's always a chance in the spring for some decent precipitation events to occur in the high country. But, the forecast really doesn't trend toward that. One thing I will say about things, as I'm sure a lot of you track information like this. One thing to note is the sites that is tracking this information, they're really grounded in our high country. So, kind of that 10,000 foot elevation and higher, whereas, most of us interact with the landscape and where we live is sort of that mid elevation band, so 6,000 to 8,000 feet. So we don't have quite the resolution of snowpack data for mid or low elevation in our area as we do the high elevation, but these are good proxies. Another proxy that we can look at is soil moisture. And so what we're looking at here is the soil moisture anomaly. So again, this is based off of a long-term, trend of soil moisture. And so we're looking, and again, this is, a much coarser scale of information than we have locally. But we can see here in Southwest Colorado, for the month of February, we're below average for soil moisture content. And so that's a good proxy of saying, well, how much moisture is out there, as we dive into the growing season for, trees, plants, shrubs, all the vegetation that's out there to have available to it, to be in in our vegetation. And so I'll talk about fuel moisture here in a bit, but not having high soil moisture, can equate to lower fuel moisture content, in live vegetation. So that just increases the potential for, wildfire. So that increases that risk. So I've been on a lot of briefings over the past, couple of weeks here, looking at fire weather outlook for our region and for Colorado in general for this year. And so what we're looking at here is the potential predicted outlook for May and June of 2021. And so we can see here where we have red. And again, this is a pretty coarse scale. It's above normal, below normal, and normal. But we're looking at trending towards above normal as we go into our summer months. And, as we know here in Southwest Colorado, we might have that moisture in the springtime, but June tends to be a pretty dry month here before monsoon kicks in. And so, we are kind of setting up to be very similar in terms of just inherent risk as we saw in, say, 2018. So, with that comes, just our, due diligence and vigilance out there as far as being prepared for wildfire to occur here in Southwest Colorado. It's not a matter of, we don't know when and where that's exactly going to occur. As we start going into the fire season here, our local fire managers with the San Juan, with the BLM, they do a lot of, math essentially to look at where that risk is going to occur, and so they can plan ahead. And they're already planning ahead for this fire season, but it's just kind of waiting to see, what actually happens. So apparently I'm not advancing here. So a couple of things to kind of think about as we go into this fire season. And, it's kind of funny to say fire season, it's, we're seeing fire seasons extend, fire seasons kind of like being continuous in states like California. But really here in Southwest Colorado, we can think of, our fire season as being, kind of those, April at the earliest, through the summer months and on into the fall months. So it's sort of that April to October window. As we saw last year, because of the lack of monsoonal moisture, we did have, wildfires burning, and a couple burning in the high country, well late into the season, kind of beyond where we might expect to have fire. So, every year is a little bit different. And, it's, it's, the risk is there, the potential is there. It's just a matter of, waiting for, if things happen, they're going to happen. So what we're looking at here, and this is sort of a live update of what we call energy release components. That's the potential. There's a whole lot of factors that go into ERC. That's the potential for fire to occur. And so, as we would expect right now, we're well below, percentages for ERC because, there's snow on the ground. There's a lot of moisture out there in relative terms. But, this is one of the things that our fire managers track going into, spring and into the summer. We will start seeing these colors, kind of bump up into these higher percentiles. When things start bumping up into 90 to 96 percentile, and especially getting to that 97th percentile, we'll start seeing, that's when fire bands start materializing for, say, the San Juan. And so this is one of the components that go into those decision-making processes. So again, there's a lot of data and information that's going into these calculations. And that's, informing our land managers how to, allocate resources and plan resources ahead to respond to um, potential wildfire, and get those notices and fire bans and restrictions out in place, well ahead of things bumping up into higher conditions. um, so again, a couple of key terms to kind of follow, to get a little more geeky about this. One is that energy release component, and there's a whole set of equations that go into that. But essentially, you can think of it as the potential for fire to happen, to occur. One of the key components that goes into ERC is fuel moisture, and so this is something you might have heard back during, say, the 416 fire. Folks, you might have heard fire incident folks talk about fuel moisture content. And so really what we can think of fuel moisture, and it's measured in these kind of this odd scale of 1/10 hour fuels. And that's just a proxy for the actual diameter of that fuel. And so really what we can think of with that is, say, 100-hour fuel. It's a good size fuel. We can think of about the size of our one's wrist and a little bit bigger. But it's the time it takes for that fuel, and this is a dead fuel, for that fuel to reach a homeostasis. So say you have a 10% relative humidity, it would take about 100 hours for that fuel to have a fuel moisture content of that would be equal to the relative humidity is exposed to. And so the lower that fuel moisture number, the higher the potential of that fuel is to ignite. And 1 hour fuels are very small. They're kind of twig size. You can think of 10-hour fuels as sticks, and 100-hour fuels as small logs. And those are all scattered throughout the forest. And the lower those numbers are, the higher the potential is for those fuels to combust. And so that's one of the factors that goes into that ERC. Another thing that we look at is Haynes index, and that's a little bit more of a geeky thing. And that's really just the potential for fire to spread. So the higher the Haynes index number, the higher the potential for an ignition to actually spread. And so again, fuel moistures go into that, but other weather conditions such as wind and relative humidity are also factoring into that. So if you're hearing kind of fire weather reports and you hear like high Haynes index numbers of 6, 7, 8, 9, that's saying there's a high potential for any ignition to then spread, or current ignition to propagate and grow. The last term there, and something a few of you might be familiar with, but is RAWs. And so these are remote automated weather stations. And so these are the stations that are out there across our landscape that feed a lot of the information into these models for fire weather. And so we can see here in Southwest Colorado, these little green dots, which are, like I said, they're green right now because of the snow on the ground. These are our local RAWs stations. There are other stations that go into play. The San Juan will put out remote temporary fire weather stations. It might be in areas where they're planning to do prescribed burning, or it might be in an area that's that they're concerned about in terms of potential ignitions. So again, a lot of information goes into how we look at fire weather and predict fire weather. Not sure anything. So I wanted to think about, as we go throughout 2021, and a lot of what drives climate here in Southwest Colorado and our weather in Southwest Colorado is the El Nino La Nina, or ENSO oscillation in the Pacific Ocean. Currently, we're in a La Nina year, so it's a cooler than average anomaly in the Southern Pacific. And what that tends to trend towards is drier conditions for the Southwest. What we're looking at going into 2021 is a shift from La Nina to what's called a neutral ENSO. So it's not La Nina, it's not El Nino, it's sort of there in the middle. And so it's kind of a crapshoot as far as what actually occurs with that. But we should start seeing a trend more towards that Pacific moisture starting to return. And the current predictions are that we'll start shifting towards more of a El Nino kind of pattern toward the end of the year and thinking into like 2022. So El Nino, you can think of more moisture available to, us in Southwest Colorado. Think of those big, heavy winter storms that we received back during the 2019 winter season. Those were a lot of El Nino precipitation events. And so it's a cycle. PDO, Pacific Decadal Oscillation, is a sort of fancy term for that. And so, there'll be a year and a half or so of La Nina, a year or so of neutral, and then, maybe a year or so of El Nino. And it cycles throughout. If we went back to that drought index slide that I had at the beginning, we could actually, if we had the graph there, we could actually marry, that PDO cycling with where we're seeing those droughts and those drier and wetter periods. So a couple of key things to think about for 2021. I'm going to borrow from the old L&T leave no trace adage of plan ahead and prepare. But that's really kind of where we are this year. It's really, knowing that there's a high potential for wildfire here in Southwest Colorado this season. So it's what we can do as, community leaders. You all are, have stepped up as folks in your, various HOAs and communities, thinking about, being prepared for wildfire, either be that through mitigation efforts or, things like Ready, Set, Go or evacuation planning, things like that. So, really kind of, this is a good time to step back and say, hey, how am I personally and how is my community ready for the potential of wildfire this season? And it might not just be like, the fire's rolling into your neighborhood, but it's, is there a wildfire occurring in Southwest Colorado? Are there going to be big wildfires, regionally? As I showed you with that map earlier, the entire Southwest is kind of predicted to have a higher than average wildfire risk this season. And, we could start seeing significant, ignition events in, say, Arizona or New Mexico, pretty soon here. Is there going to be smoke? And are you or do you know folks that are sensitive to smoke and need to plan for that? So think about, the kind of the Ready, Set, Go model. And one of the great resources out there, I'm sure you guys are familiar with a few of these, but readyforwildfire.org, which is a CAL FIRE, the California Wildfire Incident Group that is put that together. There's a lot of great resources there, but really kind of for you is, thinking about, how are you going to evacuate? Or do you have that bag ready to go? What are the alternative routes out of your communities? Should there be, an incident where, one of the routes is blocked off? Are there routes that, you might know about, but, your other folks in your neighborhoods might not actually know about? The other kind of key thing for this going into this season is really kind of being on top of, what fire restrictions are in place, either be that through your county or the San Juan National Forest. Those are the kind of the primary two as far as restrictions. Municipalities as well. So like the city of Durango does have its own set of restrictions. Then, this is a good season to kind of think about geeking out with fire weather resources. And like I said, I will share kind of a set of good resources for you all with Charlie here and along with this presentation, so you can have these to look at your leisure. I will say these resources, especially when you get to the level of like the Rocky Mountain Area Coordination Center, they can be a little overwhelming for the kind of layperson to engage with. But I encourage everyone to kind of explore around and see what's there, because these are the tools that the professionals are actually using to make those operational and management decisions. Another great resource is the Durango Interagency Fire Dispatch Facebook page. Durango Interagency, it's not just Durango, but it's all of Southwest Colorado. So this is BLM, Forest Service, our local fire protection districts all interface through this entity, and they have a lot of great resources throughout the season on where fires are local, what's happening regionally, and then a lot of like that up-to-date information on like that event event that's actually occurring in real time. Another good resource for folks who are just curious about where smoke is coming from, either locally or regionally, because we especially folks over on the Pagosa side, y'all are in the catcher's mitt of the San Juans, and smoke coming from California or Arizona, it kind of just builds up, in the little crook of the San Juans there, and so it might be a really smoky day, but that smoke might be coming from somewhere really far away. So we've developed it's currently not operational because we're not, updating it currently, but once we get into sort of fire season, we'll start updating it again. But the San Juan Headwaters Forest Health Partnership has been hosting that map. And so it's sanjuanheadwaters.org/smoke. And so that's a compilation of a lot of different resources that is, tracking where fires are and where a couple of different smoke models are showing where smoke is coming from. Kind of a one-stop shop, because again, a lot of these resources currently are kind of hard to use and track down as an individual. Last thing I will note here is that even though we are looking at a pretty high risk for wildfire and potential for this year, the San Juan and BLM are still planning prescribed fires for this year. But again, and as I have in quotes there, or in parentheses there, pending conditions. So, there's a lot of effort and a lot of planning that goes into a prescribed fire. These are great tools for, wide scale mitigation efforts. So removing fuels, removing some of the understory, and, just thinking about the ecology of our ponderosa pine forest, bringing fire back into a fire adapted forest, is key for both, not only our needs as humans on the landscape, but the actual ecology of the forest as well. And so there are prescribed fires planned for this season for folks, over in the Pagosa area, kind of that Brock over Mesa, Turkey Springs area. There's, if conditions are right, there are, fires planned for that area. I don't have super specifics over there. I'm kind of not quite as tied into that landscape as I have been in the past. Here, in the central part of the San Juans, continuing the efforts the San Juan has been doing around Bayfield over in the HDs and up on the north side of 160. There's a couple of large, blocks that are planned to be burned, again, if conditions are appropriate for it. The BLM is actually planning and has released a environmental assessment on fuels treatment for La Plata County. And as part of that fuels treatment is a plan for prescribed fire. And probably not this year, but going into 2022, we can expect to see BLM actually implementing prescribed fires, a little bit closer to Durango, in some of the areas up like County Road 240, and up around like Edgemont, Aspen Trails, and Forest Lakes, sort of that area, as far as where they have where those little BLM checkerboard lands are kind of intermixed. And then over on the Dolores side, areas like Turkey Creek, Boggy Draw, those are part of bigger fuels management EAs. And again, if conditions are right, the San Juan would like to implement prescribed burning in those areas as well. So a lot of that's going to be really contingent on how potentially monsoon pans out this summer. And so maybe not a lot of planned smoke in the air this spring, but potentially this fall, if there's a good monsoon, we can kind of expect some intentional smoke in the air. So yeah, so with that, I'm happy to take any questions. I know there's quite a bit to cover in just a little bit of time. Again, the take home is potential is high this year. The risk is going to be high this year. So, do what you can to, like I said, plan ahead and prepare for potential ignitions this season. Yeah, so with that, thank you for allowing me to speak, and I'll take questions. Yeah, Louise, I will be sharing this presentation.
Perfect. So if anybody else has any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat box. I did go through and mute everybody at the beginning just so that we didn't have any interference from anybody else's microphones. Feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand virtually or any of those things if you have any questions.
Anthony, I just wanted to bring up that I know that MSI is planning its forest learning series, right, starting next month. So maybe you can tell a little bit more about that, and we'll include that in our e-news as well for those.
Yeah, thanks, Ashley. That's something I really should remember to start plugging now that we have got it all finalized. Yeah, so Mountain Studies will be hosting our 4th annual, which is kind of crazy to think we've been doing this for 4 years now, Forest and Fire Learning Series. It'll be a virtual event, and we're planning on hosting that every Thursday throughout the month of April. I believe it's going to be 6 to 7 p.m. It'll be a Zoom type event, I think, and we might be doing another kind of platform, but I will share the marketing materials for that with you. Actually, you can share that with the group here. But we'll have speakers speaking on community preparedness from the county perspective. We'll have folks talking about operations, some of the lessons learned from 2020. So not only a kind of unprecedented fire season, although like every year tends to be unprecedented when it comes to fire seasons, but also, with the layering of COVID and with a rather unprecedented season as well too. I think we have one speaker that'll be talking about some of the public health effects of smoke, one of the evenings. Perfect. And Ashley just dropped a link in the chat box there for the learning series. So open to anybody. So please join us.
Perfect. It looks like we have one question in the chat box from Bill. Is the El Nino La Nina cycle a significant driver of weather here, or just a general trend?
Yeah, Bill, that's a really good question. So it is. When we think about, particularly when we think about our winter and spring precipitation, so where we are in the continental United States, we either get moisture from the northwest, or we get the moisture from the southwest. And so all that southwest moisture, by and large, is driven by what's happening in the southern Pacific, which is, by proxy, driven by that El Nino La Nina cycle. So again, El Nino is a warmer than average surface water or surface temperature condition in the southern Pacific, and La Nina is a cooler than average surface temperature condition in the southern Pacific. So the warmer water is, the more energy there is for that water to vaporize, find its way into the atmosphere and find its way to us here in Southwest Colorado. So if we look at 2019, that was a pretty decent El Nino winter. And so a lot of those storms were those sort of southwesterly storms coming out of the southern, ultimately that moisture coming from the southern Pacific. But again, it is a little bit of a crapshoot too, because we might be in a strong El Nino, but if jet stream patterns and those sort of driving conditions steer moisture a little bit further south, or maybe it brings it further north, we might not get that precipitation. So there's always that wonderful thing where we're kind of at that line here in the San Juans where they're getting nuked on snow-wise in northern New Mexico, but we're not getting much of anything. Or kind of the converse of that is where like the Front Range or Utah is getting hammered with snow, and we're also not getting much of anything. So, but as a general trend, yeah, there is a strong correlation between what's happening with El Nino, La Nino, and what we're seeing as far as winter precipitation in the San Juans.
Perfect, thank you. And I see Mike, looks like you unmuted yourself. Did you have a question?
Oh, I just wanted to know what, there was one chart where everything would look green on our area. But where are we right now? What's our moisture content right now?
So moisture content in terms of how are you defining moisture? Because that's one of the
Well,
tricky
are we in a, are we, if I was to tell anyone where we were, is it extreme drought, moderate drought, neutral? Where are we? In
Yeah, so if
Durango.
we go back to this graph here, we are in extreme drought. So we're in what's called D4, which is
Okay.
extreme drought.
Okay,
Yep.
thanks.
Charlie, can I ask a question? This is Mark Norton. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it, Mark.
Anthony, thanks. Good presentation. Given the heightened usage of public lands, does that factor in with the BLM or National Forest in terms of when they introduced restrictions or to what degree they introduced them?
Yeah, that's actually a huge factor, and as we've seen from like from last year with the pretty darn crazy explosion of recreation use here in Southwest Colorado. You know, there's not that there's not always recreation use, and there's certainly high use areas, but you know that is a tricky piece there because there is a disruption potential for recreation opportunities with prescribed fire. A lot of the areas where we do prescribe fire, and I'm thinking of areas like to the Boggy Draw or Chicken Creek area over on the Dolores side, or the Turkey Springs, Brockover Mesa side, or area over on the Pagosa side. You know, those are high usage trail areas, but one of the interesting things there is a lot of those trails, and the reason why a lot of those trails are there is they are control features, or they were put in as control features for prescribed fire. And so, you know, the San Juan will, you know, do a huge public outreach campaign before any prescribed fire event for the local community and, you know, with trail users. But, you know, the reality is a lot of those trails, you know, they get temporarily closed during those prescribed fire events. You know, and really those disruptions shouldn't last more than a couple of days. Because if we're doing prescribed fire in a way that's, you know, quote, within the prescriptions that we want, it's not something super intensive, and we shouldn't see a lot of, like, you know, trees, you know, flaring up and causing potential hazard for trail users. But it's certainly something that the San Juan and the BLM does focus on as they plan their ignitions. BLM is you know, and it's probably no surprise here, but BLM is looking at something like Animas City Mountain, which again is, you know, something that's in an urban area and sees a lot of trail use, as an area that would be ideal for prescribed fire. Like there's a lot of features that are up there that would make it a good candidate for prescribed fire. And it's an area that, you know, really needs to actually see some fire on the ground to meet mitigation goals and to just improve the overall ecology up there. So yeah, those are factored in considerably.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. And I actually see a comment that we have Nino with the BLM on, and she said that she can make her fill us in a little bit on some of the details of the BLM plan. So would you like to unmute yourself and jump on?
All right. Yeah. Hi, everyone. So I got some updates from Tyler Corbin and Ian Barrett on the fuel side of what kind of broadcast burning, prescribed burning that we're planning on doing. They're hoping beginning April 15th, that would be the earliest that they would actually look at some of these sites to burn. And of course, if the conditions allow for that. But the Dawson project area is 885 acres. It's pinyon, juniper, and mixed mountain shrub. It's split into 3 units. So when we say it's that many acres, they're not actually, I mean, if conditions were ideal, maybe they could burn all that at the same time, but usually it's portions of that or just one of the units when they're burning. So there's a lot of, like, the prescription tells tells us how to burn in what conditions. So we kind of meet that, and sometimes burns they'll start them and then they'll get shut down early because the conditions have changed on that. And then that one's located mostly in Dolores County, but little bits in San Miguel. And it's 13 miles east to northeast of Dove Creek and 10 miles east of Egner. The other one is the West Dolores Rim project, and that's 2,685 acres of ponderosa pine and gamble oak. There's 10 units out there. It's located 7 miles east of Dove Creek, and it's a place that's referred to as East and North Pines. As Anthony mentioned, Anderson City Mountain Project area is something that we are definitely looking at. The earliest we would be looking, if everything goes right, would be this fall for portions of that. And that's going to be 717 acres is what they're currently looking at, and split into 8 different units. Planning on using the hot shots for that. Obviously, it's right there by the city of Durango. So, communication plan strategy, we'll be working with a lot of our partners on all that kind of stuff. But, probably, we say the earliest is this fall, but it could be spring by the time. So just depends on conditions and everything on that. So, yeah, that's all I have, unless anyone has questions.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing. And
Thanks.
yeah, feel free, anybody, to unmute yourselves and ask a question, or drop it in the chat box. All right, well, I'm not seeing anything else pop up. So unless Bill or Alex or Ashley, do you guys have anything else to share with the group?
Just want to thank Anthony again for joining us tonight. It was very helpful and good information for us going forward. And thanks, Dina, for your update as well. Really appreciate it.
Charlie, could I ask you a question?
Yes.
So I had a homeowner call me right before the meeting, and they wanted to know when you plan on starting your home visits.
Gotcha. That is a great question. And I will have more information for you about that after tomorrow. Tomorrow is when we're really working through when we're going to be opening up all the site visits. We do have a backlog from last year, and so we want to make sure that we don't get too overwhelmed immediately and end up staying behind for the whole summer. So if you have somebody who is interested right now, especially if they have any really pressing issues, then feel free to pass on my information, and I can kind of deal with that on a case-by-case basis. But I'd say probably within the next month and a half is when we'll open up that online sign up, so that I can at least catch up on some of that backlog before we open the floodgates again.
Okay. And then another neighbor called about the chipper rebate. Are they doing that again this year?
So we will have the chipper rebate. And Ashley, do you want to chime in on this?
Yeah, so the chipper rebate this year will be the same as last year. We'll probably open it up as of April 1st. All the information will be on the website by then, and it will also be included in the e-news that we'll send around next week. But again, it will be up to $250 for an individual or $750 for an HOA, 50% up to those maximums for either renting a chipper or hiring a crew to come out and do the chipping work.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Anthony. Thank you, Dina, for sharing great information. And gives us at least a little bit of information about what we should expect in the future. Although I think, as we all have seen, if even if we have a really wet winter and wet summer, if something happens at a bad time in a bad place, we still can see significant fires. And so it's something that, years like this are great motivators for a lot of people who aren't thinking about these things regularly. But, I want to thank all our ambassadors for continuing to think about these things, even when it doesn't seem like it's going to be an immediate threat, because as we have all seen, fire seasons are extending out, and we always are going to be preparing not just for this upcoming fire season, but for the next one and the next one after that. So thank you, Anthony. Thank you, Dina. Thank you, everybody, for attending, and we can get out of here a little bit earlier than normal. So thank you, everybody. Have a great rest of your night.